I used to think every family had cracks in it. Tiny fractures hidden under holiday photos, forced smiles, and carefully worded Christmas cards. My parents had been divorced since I was 12. My younger sister barely spoke to my dad anymore, and I spent most of my 20s trying to convince myself that dysfunction was normal. But there's a difference between a family having problems and discovering that your entire life was built around a lie so disturbing it rewires every memory you have. I was 34 when everything started unraveling. At the time, I lived in Denver. I worked as a project manager for a commercial construction company downtown, spent too much money on takeout, and had recently ended a 5-year relationship that left me emotionally numb for almost a year. My ex, Rachel, cheated on me with a coworker, which should have made me more suspicious of people in general, but weirdly, it did the opposite. I became exhausted by paranoia, exhausted by trying to catch people in lies, so I stopped looking for them. That's probably why I missed all the signs. It started with a phone call from my mother on a Tuesday night in November. I remember because it was snowing outside my apartment, and I'd just gotten home after sitting in traffic for nearly an hour. I was halfway through eating cold Thai food on my couch when my phone buzzed. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice unusually soft. My mom always sounded tired these days. Since retiring from nursing, she'd become quieter somehow, less sharp around the edges. "You okay?" I asked. There was a pause. "I need a favor." That immediately put me on alert. My mother hated asking for help. "What's wrong?" "It's your grandfather." I leaned forward instantly. "What happened?" "He collapsed this morning. They admitted him to St. Vincent's." I closed my eyes. My grandfather was 86, but stubborn enough to still mow his own lawn in Ohio every week like he had something to prove to the neighborhood. "What did the doctors say?" "They found a mass." Her voice cracked slightly. "They're running more tests." I swallowed hard. "I'll fly out tomorrow." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Another silence. Then she sighed. "Thank you." I booked the flight that night. The next morning, Denver International looked like every other airport in America during winter. Exhausted people, overpriced coffee, kids crying near charging stations. I barely slept the night before. My grandfather practically raised me after my parents divorced. My dad disappeared into his second marriage almost immediately, while my mom worked double shifts at the hospital. Grandpa Frank became the stable thing in my life. Baseball games, old Western movies, grilled burgers in his backyard during summer. He was the closest thing I had to a real father. When I landed in Cleveland, my mother picked me up from the airport herself. The first thing I noticed was how nervous she looked. Not sad, nervous. She hugged me quickly before pulling away too fast. "You look exhausted," I told her. "I haven't slept much." "Is he awake?" "Yeah." They moved him into a regular room. The drive to the hospital felt strange. My mother kept fiddling with the heat controls, then turning the radio on and off. She barely made eye contact with me. Finally, I asked, "Mom, what's going on?" "What do you mean?" "You're acting weird." "I'm worried about my dad." "No," I said quietly. "This feels different." She gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You ever get the feeling," she said slowly, "that your whole life can change in one day?" A chill moved through me. "What are you talking about?" But she just shook her head. "Nothing." That should have been the moment I pushed harder. Instead, I let it go. At the hospital, Grandpa looked smaller than I remembered, frail, his skin almost gray against the white sheets. But when he saw me walk in, his eyes lit up immediately. "There's my boy," he rasped. I hugged him carefully. "You scared the hell out of me." "Ah, doctors love drama." Typical Frank. For the next hour, we talked normally. Football, weather, dumb stories from my job site. He even joked about hospital food tasting like wet cardboard. But something felt off. Every time my mother left the room, Grandpa stared at me with this strange expression, like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. Finally, when Mom stepped out to talk to a nurse, he motioned me closer. "Ethan," he whispered. "Yeah?" His eyes watered instantly, and that terrified me more than anything else because I had never seen my grandfather cry. "Your mother," he stopped, struggling for breath. "She should have told you years ago." My stomach tightened. "Told me what?" He looked toward the door, then back at me. But before he could answer, my mother walked back in. and the look she gave him made my blood run cold. Not concern, fear, pure fear. The room went silent. Grandpa leaned back against the bed without another word. My mother forced a smile at me. Doctor wants to run another scan. Nobody spoke after that. That night, I stayed at my mom's house instead of getting a hotel. Big mistake. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up thirsty and walked downstairs for water. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. My mother was sitting alone at the table with a stack of old papers spread out in front of her. The second she saw me, she jumped. "Jesus, Ethan, you okay?" She immediately started gathering the papers together. "What are those?" "Nothing." I frowned. "Mom, it's paperwork." At 2 in the morning? She stood abruptly. "Go back to bed." That pissed me off instantly. "What the hell is going on with you?" "Nothing is going on. Grandpa literally tried telling me something today before you walked in." Her face went pale. I'd never seen someone lose color that fast.
"He's confused," she said quickly. "Bullshit. Watch your language." "No, you watch your language. You've been acting insane all day." She looked like she might cry. Instead, she whispered, "Some secrets exist for a reason." The room felt suddenly smaller. What does that mean? But she grabbed the papers and walked away. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I decided to stop playing passive. While my mother showered upstairs, I went looking for those documents. I know how bad that sounds, snooping through your own mother's private things. But something in my gut told me this wasn't normal family drama. I found the papers inside a storage box in the hall closet. Old photographs, hospital records, birth certificates, and one envelope. My name written across the front and my grandfather's handwriting. My hands literally started shaking. I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 14 years earlier. "If you're reading this, your mother finally failed to keep the truth hidden." I remember reading that first sentence 3 times because my brain refused to process it. "The truth about your father belongs to you." I stopped breathing for a second. "Your biological father is not Daniel Harper." I stared at the page. My dad, the man who raised me, the man whose last name I carried. Not my father? I actually laughed out loud at first because it felt absurd, like some bad soap opera twist. Then I kept reading. "Your mother had an affair in 1991 with a man named Viktor Orlov. He was living illegally in Cleveland at the time after immigrating from Russia during the collapse of the Soviet Union." I felt ice move through my chest. "Your mother ended the affair when she discovered who he truly was." I flipped the page faster. "Viktor was involved with organized crime, money laundering, violence. The FBI investigated him in 1993, but before charges could be filed, he disappeared. Your mother believed it was safer if nobody ever knew the truth about you." I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just sat there on the hallway floor staring at the paper while my entire identity shattered in real time. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. My mother. I shoved the letter back into the envelope. Too late. She rounded the corner and froze. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. Then she saw the papers in my hands, and the expression on her face wasn't guilt. It was terror. Real terror. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What is this?" She started shaking immediately. "Ethan, what the hell is this?" "I can explain." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to say that after 34 years. Tears filled her eyes. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" She didn't answer. "Who the hell is Viktor Orlov?" The second I said his name, she looked physically sick. And that's when I realized something even worse. This wasn't ancient history to her. She was still afraid of him, after all these years. My mother sat down slowly, like her legs were giving out beneath her. I was still standing in the hallway, clutching the letter so tightly the paper had crumpled in my fist. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock downstairs, the hum of the heater kicking on, snow hitting the windows outside. Normal sounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. Finally, she whispered, "Close the closet." I almost laughed. "That's your concern right now?" "Please." Something about her voice unsettled me enough that I actually did it. Then I followed her downstairs into the kitchen, where she sat at the table staring blankly at her coffee cup like she couldn't remember how she got there. I stayed standing. "You lied to me my entire life." "I know. You let me believe Dad was my father." "He is your father." "No," I snapped. "Apparently he isn't." He raised you. That's not the point. Tears slid down her face immediately, but I was too angry to care yet. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it. She looked toward the window instinctively before speaking, and I noticed something bizarre. She always checked the windows, like someone might be outside watching. I met Victor when I was 23, she said quietly. Your father and I were separated for a while. You and Dad separated? Yes, briefly. Another lie. Another piece of family history rewritten in real time. He was charming at first. She continued. Funny.
Different from anyone I'd ever met. Russian mobster charm? Don't do that. Do what? React like a normal human being? She flinched. That should have made me feel guilty, but honestly, I was too furious. He told me he worked construction, she said. Said he came to America for opportunities after everything collapsed back home. What was he actually doing? She hesitated. I don't know everything. Try me. Her fingers tightened around the mug. There were clubs, gambling, stolen cars, money moving through businesses. She swallowed hard. Dangerous men. And you didn't notice? At first? No. I shook my head in disbelief. Then I got pregnant. The room fell silent again. You told him? Yes. And? Her face changed instantly. That's the only way I can describe it. Like she mentally went somewhere awful. He became possessive. A cold feeling crept into my chest. He started showing up at my apartment unexpectedly, watching me at work, telling me I belonged to him now. Her voice trembled. One night he grabbed me so hard he bruised my arm because a waiter smiled at me. I stared at her. For the first time since finding the letter, my anger loosened slightly. You stayed with him? I was scared. Then how did Dad come back into the picture? She looked down. Daniel knew I was pregnant. I blinked. What? He knew. That hit me harder than the affair itself. What do you mean he knew? He knew the baby might not be his. I literally couldn't process it. My dad knew. All these years, he said he didn't care. She whispered. He loved me anyway. I sat down slowly across from her, because suddenly my legs felt unstable. No, I muttered. No way. It's true. So everyone knew except me? Not everyone, but Grandpa knew. Yes. And Grandma? Yes. My chest tightened painfully. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family vacation, all of them carrying this secret together, while I walked around clueless. I felt humiliated in a way I can't fully explain, like my entire existence had been discussed behind closed doors my whole life. Why didn't Dad ever tell me? Because he was your father. No, I said again, louder this time. Stop saying that. My mother started crying harder. He changed your diapers, taught you baseball, sat through every school concert. He loved you. That doesn't erase this. I know. Does he know I found out? She shook her head quickly. No. When were you planning to tell me? We weren't. The honesty of that answer hit like a punch. We agreed years ago that it was safer. There's that word again. She looked at me carefully. Ethan, Victor was not a good man. What happened to him? We don't know. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth. I leaned back in my chair, trying to breathe through the rage boiling in me. Then another thought hit. Wait, why was Grandpa trying to tell me now? She looked exhausted suddenly. Because he thinks he's dying. And? He didn't want to take the secret with him. I stared at the letter again. Did Dad ever meet Victor? Her silence answered before her mouth did. Oh my God, I whispered. Yes. What happened? She closed her eyes. It was bad. I waited. He came to our house after you were born. A knot formed in my stomach. You were 6 months old. Daniel was holding you when Victor showed up. Her voice became distant, shaky. He said he wanted his son. My skin prickled instantly. What did Dad do? He told him to leave. And? He refused. I could practically feel the tension of that moment in the room, despite it happening decades earlier. Then Victor threatened him. What kind of threat? My mother looked directly at me. The kind men like him make. I didn't speak. Daniel called the police, she continued. But Victor disappeared before they arrived. Did he come back? Her silence again. And suddenly I understood. He did. She nodded slowly. Several times. I felt sick. He followed me home from work once, left flowers on my car, called the house in the middle of the night. She wiped her face. Then one evening, Daniel found him sitting outside watching our house. Jesus Christ. He told Daniel that blood mattered more than paper. I looked away, because despite everything, some twisted part of me wanted to know about this man, my biological father.
That thought alone made me feel disloyal, like I was betraying the dad who actually raised me. I don't remember any of this. You were little. What happened after that? The FBI started investigating him around the same time. One of his associates got arrested. There were rumors people were cooperating. She exhaled shakily. Then Victor vanished. Just vanished? Yes, that doesn't happen. It did. I rubbed both hands over my face. This is insane. I know. No, I snapped. You don't know. You've had 30 years to process this. She stared at me helplessly. You think I haven't suffered? The anger in her voice caught me off guard. You think I slept peacefully all these years? Every time the phone rang late at night, every strange car outside, every unknown number. She shook her head. I lived terrified. Something about the way she said it felt real, too real to fake. Then she quietly added, I still do. That sentence lingered in the room. Still do. As if Victor Orlov might somehow reappear after 3 decades. That's impossible, I muttered. You don't know what men like him are capable of. And apparently neither do you. She stood up abruptly. I deserve that. The guilt hit me instantly, because she looked older than ever standing there, fragile, haunted. But before I could say anything, her phone rang. She froze. Not normal surprise. Panic. Absolute panic. I watched the teller drain from her face as she stared at the screen. Who is it? I asked. She didn't answer. Mom? Then she declined the call. My pulse sped up. Who was that? Spam. Bullshit. She grabbed the counter edge tightly. It's nothing. But her hands were shaking violently now. I walked toward her. Let me see the phone. No. Why not? Because I said so. I snatched it before she could pull away. She gasped. Then I looked at the screen. Unknown number, 1 missed call, and beneath it, a voicemail notification. My mother lunged for the phone immediately. Don't. What the hell is wrong with you? Ethan, please? I hit play. At first, there was only static, then breathing, heavy breathing, and finally, a man's voice, low, rough, older, but unmistakably calm. I know he found out. Every hair on my body stood up. My mother covered her mouth instantly. The voice continued. You should have told him sooner, Elena. I looked at her slowly. Her face was frozen in terror. Then the message ended. No name, no threat, nothing else. But the room felt poisoned now. I stared at my mother. When did this start? She broke completely, crying so hard she could barely speak. 3 months ago. The floor seemed to disappear beneath me. What? The call started 3 months ago, and you didn't tell anyone? I thought it would stop. How many calls? I don't know. Mom, maybe 15. Jesus Christ. He never says much, just little things. What kind of things? She looked physically ill. Things only Victor would know. I felt cold all over. You think it's him? I know it's him. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I didn't fully believe it anymore, because something about that voicemail felt wrong in a way I can't explain. Not like a prank, not random, personal, intimate. Then another realization slammed into me. He knows about me. My mother nodded weakly. And now he knows I found out. Neither of us spoke. Outside, snow kept falling quietly across the neighborhood, while my entire reality shifted into something darker than I ever imagined possible. Then my mother whispered the sentence that changed everything. He's coming back. I didn't believe her at first, not fully. My brain kept trying to force logic onto the situation because the alternative sounded insane. Men like Victor Orlov didn't just disappear for 30 years and suddenly start making creepy phone calls like some ghost crawling out of the past. Real life wasn't supposed to work like that. But fear has a way of infecting people, especially family, especially when secrets have been buried so long they start feeling alive.
I told myself my mother was traumatized, that she'd spent decades carrying guilt and paranoia until every unknown number became a threat. That explanation made sense. Unfortunately, the next 48 hours destroyed it. I barely left her side after the voicemail. Part of me stayed because I was worried about her.
The other part stayed because I suddenly felt like the ground under my life had disappeared. I didn't know who I was supposed to be anymore. Ethan Harper suddenly sounded fake in my own head. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling while memories replayed differently now. Every fight my parents ever had, every awkward silence during family gatherings, every weird moment I brushed aside over the years. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep and went downstairs for whiskey. The house was dark except for the stove light over the kitchen. I poured myself a drink and stood there in silence. Then I noticed movement outside. A car, parked across the street. Black sedan, engine running. At first I thought nothing of it. Probably some teenager on his phone or an Uber driver waiting for a pickup. Then I realized it was 3 in the morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nobody sat parked outside random houses. I stared through the blinds harder. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. A weird pressure built in my chest. I told myself not to be dramatic. Then the headlights turned on, and the car slowly drove away. I didn't tell my mother. I should have. Instead, I convinced myself I was letting her paranoia infect me too. The next morning, we went back to the hospital together. Grandpa looked worse. That scared me more than I expected. He'd always seemed indestructible to me. One of those old-school men who could survive anything through pure stubbornness alone. Seeing him weak made everything else feel even more unstable. When my mother stepped out to talk to a doctor, Grandpa looked at me carefully. "She told you." I nodded slowly. "You should have heard it from us years ago." "Why didn't I?" He sighed deeply. "Because your mother was terrified." "Were you?" His eyes met mine. Yes. That answer landed heavier than I expected, because Grandpa Frank wasn't afraid of anything. At least, not in my memory. This was a man who once chased a burglar down the street in his underwear, holding a baseball bat. What exactly did Victor do? Grandpa looked toward the hospital door instinctively, before lowering his voice. There are dangerous people in this world, Ethan. Men who enjoy control. Men who treat fear like currency. That doesn't answer my question. He rubbed his jaw slowly. Your mother fell in love with the wrong man at the wrong time. You met him? Yes. And? His expression hardened instantly. He looked at people like property. A chill went through me. That's dramatic. No, Grandpa said quietly. It's accurate. I sat beside him in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been eating at me all night. Did Dad really know I might not be his? Yes. And he stayed anyway? Grandpa smiled faintly. That man loved you before you were even born. I looked down. The guilt hit me again. Because since finding out the truth, part of me had felt angry at my dad too. Angry for hiding it, angry for letting me live a lie. But another part of me suddenly understood the depth of what he'd done. Most men would have left. He didn't. Where is he now? I asked. Florida with Karen, his second wife. I hadn't spoken to my dad in almost 6 months. Not because we fought. Life just drifted. Calls became less frequent. Visits became shorter. Normal adult distance. Now, suddenly, I wanted answers from him more than anyone. I'm going to call him. Grandpa nodded slowly. You should. But before I could pull out my phone, the hospital room door opened, and everything changed again. A nurse stepped inside holding flowers, white lilies. There was no card, she said. Just ask me to deliver these to Frank Harper. Grandpa's face strained instantly. So did mine, because none of us had told anyone publicly he was hospitalized yet. The nurse left awkwardly after sensing the tension. My grandfather stared at the flowers like they were poisonous. Then he whispered, "He used to send those." I felt my stomach tighten. "No," I said immediately. "No chance." But nobody answered me. My mother returned a minute later and froze the second she saw the flowers. "Oh, God." "Mom," I said firmly, "this could be coincidence." "No," she whispered. I grabbed the little plastic holder attached to the bouquet. No card, just a small folded piece of paper tucked underneath. I opened it. Family should stay together. That was it. No signature, nothing else. My mother started crying instantly. Grandpa looked furious now instead of scared. "Call the police," I said. "No," Mom said immediately. I turned toward her. "What?" "No police." "Are you serious?" "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." Her breathing became shaky. Victor hated police. He hated attention. If he thinks we're involving authorities, what? He'll do what exactly? Nobody answered, and that silence scared me more than any threat. Later that afternoon, I finally stepped outside the hospital to call my dad. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, buddy." Normal, casual. Hearing his voice nearly broke me unexpectedly. "Dad, you okay?" I looked out across the parking lot, trying to steady myself. I know. Silence. Not confusion, not shock. Silence. Then a long exhale. "Your mother told you." "Grandpa tried to." Another pause. Finally, he said quietly, "I wondered when this day would come." That hurt. Not because of the words themselves, but because they confirmed everyone had always expected this secret to explode eventually. "You really knew?" "Yes." "Since before I was born?" "Yes." I laughed bitterly. Jesus Christ. "Ethan." "No. Explain this to me. Explain how every single person in my life knew except me." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He stayed quiet. I suddenly realized he sounded exhausted too. Older than I remembered.
"She was terrified," he said finally. "So you just agreed to lie forever?" "I agreed to be your father." The anger drained out of me unexpectedly, because he sounded sincere, completely sincere. "I never cared whose blood you had," he continued. "You were my son from the second I held you." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to do anything. That's easy for you to say." "No," he said softly. "It isn't." I leaned against the hospital wall. Then I lowered my voice. "Mom thinks Victor's contacting her." Silence again, but this time different. Heavy. "Dad?" I hoped she was wrong. My pulse sped up. "You believe her?" "I think she believes it." "That's not the same thing." "No," he admitted. "It isn't." Then his tone changed, sharp suddenly. "Has anyone followed you?" I froze. "What? Any strange cars, calls, people watching the house?" I thought about the black sedan outside at 3 a.m. My stomach turned. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because Victor used to watch people before approaching them." Cold moved through my body. "That car." "What car?" I told him about the sedan. He went silent again, then quietly said, "Don't stay there tonight." The seriousness in his voice terrified me more than the story itself. "You think this guy is dangerous after 30 years? "I think men like Victor don't think normally." "What does that mean?" "It means obsession doesn't age." I looked across the parking lot. Snow covered everything now. Cars, trees, sidewalks. Then I noticed someone standing near the far edge of the garage entrance, watching me. Tall man, dark coat, maybe 60 yards away. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was absolutely staring directly at me. My chest tightened instantly. "Dad," I whispered. "What?" "There's a guy watching me." The figure didn't move. "Describe him." "I can't really see." Then the man slowly smiled. Not friendly, not normal, just calm, like he knew something I didn't. Fear hit me so hard my hands went numb. And then he turned and disappeared behind a concrete pillar. I immediately started walking toward him. "Ethan," My dad snapped through the phone. Do not follow him. Too late. I rounded the pillar into the parking structure. Empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No car doors. Nothing. The entire level silent, except for distant traffic outside. I looked around, breathing hard. Then I noticed something sitting on the hood of my rental car. Another white lily. And underneath it, a photograph. I picked it up slowly. My blood froze instantly. It was me, walking into the hospital that morning, taken from a distance, which meant someone had been watching me already. On the back of the photo, written in black ink, were 4 words. You have his eyes. I never saw it happen, she whispered, but I heard it. Nobody moved. The hospital room suddenly felt airless.
He came to my apartment one night covered in blood, she continued, staring at nothing now. I asked what happened, and he told me not to ask questions. Her voice cracked. Then 2 days later, one of the men he worked with disappeared. A cold pressure settled into my chest. You're sure? She nodded weakly. He looked proud of it. Grandpa muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. I sat down slowly because I genuinely felt dizzy. This wasn't family drama anymore. This wasn't discovering my mom had an affair. This was discovering my biological father might have been a violent criminal who had somehow re-entered our lives after 30 years. And somehow, impossibly, I was connected to him. I looked at the photograph again. You have his eyes. That sentence bothered me more than the stalking itself, because suddenly I became hyper-aware of my own face, my features, my reflection in windows. I started wondering which parts of me came from him. The shape of my jaw, my height, the dark hair, even my temper. That thought made my stomach turn. We're leaving, my mother said again. Grandpa shook his head. I'm not running. This isn't about pride anymore. No, he replied quietly. It's about ending this. The way he said it made me uneasy. What does that mean? But he ignored me. Instead, he looked toward my mother. Tell him the rest. She immediately shook her head. Dad, he deserves the truth. My pulse sped up again. What truth? Nobody answered immediately. Then Grandpa said something that hit me harder than anything else that day. Victor came back once before. I stared at him. What? My mother looked like she might throw up. When? I demanded. When you were 16. My entire body went cold. That's impossible. It happened. I tried mentally searching my memories for anything unusual around that age. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He contacted your mother first, Grandpa continued. Then he tried contacting you. What? You never knew because we stopped it. I looked at my mother in disbelief. You let me walk around ignorant while some psychopath was trying to find me? We were protecting you. Am I lying to me again? Tears streamed down her face. He wanted to meet you. The room spun for a second. What did you do? I told him no. And? He didn't accept it. My breathing slowed unnaturally, the way it does when your body starts bracing for bad news before your brain catches up. Then my grandfather looked directly at me. He followed you home from baseball practice one night. A flash hit me instantly. A memory. Small. Fuzzy. Buried deep. Black sedan headlights behind me while I rode my bike home. I remembered that. Barely. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, suddenly, it meant everything. He watched you for weeks, Grandpa said. Then one night, Daniel caught him outside the house again. I turned toward my mother. And you still never told me. You were a child. I was old enough to deserve the truth. No, she snapped suddenly. You weren't. The anger in her voice stunned me quiet. She stood there shaking violently. You have no idea what it was like living in fear of him, every second, every year, waiting for him to show up. She wiped tears from her face angrily. I would have done anything to keep you safe. The sincerity in her voice broke through my anger for the first time. Not completely, but enough.
Then Grandpa spoke again. Daniel threatened him. I looked over. What? He told Victor if he came near you again, he'd kill him himself. That hit me hard, because my dad was the calmest man I knew. Quiet, patient, rational. Imagining him making a threat like that felt impossible. But Victor backed off after that, Grandpa continued, at least for a while. For a while, I repeated. Grandpa nodded grimly. Until now. Nobody spoke after that. Outside the hospital window, snow continued falling over Cleveland in thick white sheets, while my entire identity sat shattered across that room. Eventually, I stood up. I need air. My mother looked terrified instantly. Don't go alone. I'm not a kid. You don't understand. No, I interrupted quietly. Apparently, I never understood anything. Then I walked out. The cold outside hit my lungs sharply. I stood near the hospital entrance watching traffic move through slush-covered streets while trying to think, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. Every emotion kept crashing into another. Anger, confusion, curiosity, fear, and underneath all of it was something uglier I didn't want to admit. I wanted to know about Victor, not because I approved of him, not because I wanted a relationship, but because he was part of me whether I liked it or not. That realization filled me with shame. I pulled out my phone and called my dad again. He answered immediately. How bad is it? I leaned against the concrete wall. They say he killed someone. Long silence. Then quietly, I always suspected. You knew? No proof. Just rumors. I closed my eyes. Why didn't you leave? That question came out before I could stop it, and the second it did, I regretted it. But my father answered calmly. Because I loved you. Simple. Immediate. No hesitation. That nearly destroyed me right there, outside the hospital. You weren't even sure I was yours. You were mine, he said firmly. I swallowed hard. You really believe that? Yes. I rubbed my eyes. Then I asked the question sitting deepest in my chest. Did you ever hate me for it? His answer came instantly. Never. My throat tightened painfully. I hated him, he admitted quietly. But never you. For the first time since discovering the truth, I cried. Not fully. Just silently standing there in the freezing air, while years of emotional distance between me and my father suddenly rearranged themselves into something clearer. He chose me. Every day. Even knowing the truth. That mattered more than blood ever could. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned immediately. Hospital security guard. Nothing threatening. Still, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. Sir? Yeah? Your mother's asking for you upstairs. I nodded quickly. Back in the room, the atmosphere had changed completely. My mother looked pale. Grandpa looked furious. What happened? My mother handed me her phone silently. Another voicemail, time-stamped 3 minutes earlier. I hit play. Static again. Then the same man's voice. Older, calm, controlled. You should not involve Daniel. My blood froze. Because nobody had mentioned my father's name publicly. The voice continued. He always confuses loyalty with ownership. I stared at the phone. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I only want to meet my son. The voicemail ended. Nobody moved. Then Grandpa muttered, Son of a bitch. I looked at my mother slowly. He's been watching us for a long time. She nodded weakly. And suddenly something clicked in my brain. Not fear, not panic, understanding. This wasn't random revenge. This wasn't extortion. This man genuinely believed I belonged to him, even after 34 years. That realization terrified me more than violence would have, because obsession like that doesn't follow logic. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. The room went completely silent. My mother whispered, Don't answer. But I already knew I would. I stepped into the hallway and accepted the call. For a second, there was only breathing. Then the voice. You shouldn't let them lie to you anymore. Every muscle in my body locked. Who is this? A faint chuckle. You know who. I forced myself to stay calm. What do you want? To see you. No. You sound like Daniel. Anger flashed through me instantly. You don't get to say his name. Silence. Then, surprisingly softly, he said, he raised you well. That response threw me completely off balance. I expected threats, manipulation, not that. You've been stalking my family. I've been protecting distance. What the hell does that mean? It means I stayed away because your mother asked me to. I nearly laughed. 30 years later, you suddenly respect boundaries? Another pause. Then he said something I'll never forget. Do you know what it feels like to watch your entire life from shadows? I didn't answer. Do you know what it feels like to hear another man called father by your own son? My pulse pounded violently. You lost the right to call me that before I was born. Heavy silence filled the line. Then his voice became colder. That's what they taught you. No, I snapped. That's what you earned. For the first time, I heard anger underneath his calm exterior. Not explosive, controlled, dangerous. You think Daniel protected you from me, he said quietly, but he protected you from the truth. And what truth is that? Another pause. You are more like me than you realize. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the hospital hallway staring at my phone. Those words crawled under my skin immediately because some dark part of me feared they might be true. I had his temper, his intensity, his ability to hold grudges. How much of myself actually belonged to him? And did blood matter more than I wanted to believe? That question haunted me the entire flight back to Denver 3 days later. Grandpa survived the surgery, though barely. My mother finally agreed to involve authorities after the calls escalated. My dad flew to Cleveland and stayed with her afterward. But the strangest part of everything wasn't the fear. It wasn't discovering my father wasn't biologically related to me. It was realizing the man I spent 34 years calling Dad turned out to be the only real thing in my life the entire time. Not because we shared blood, but because he chose me when he didn't have to. Victor gave me DNA. Daniel gave me a life. And in the end, that distinction became the only thing keeping me from becoming the kind of man I was terrified I might already be. I never met Victor Orlov face to face, not officially, but sometimes, late at night, I still think about that sentence. You have his eyes. And every once in a while, when I catch my reflection at the wrong angle in dark glass somewhere, I honestly don't know whose face I'm looking at anymore.